Welcome back, everybody. Today we're diving into a story that's, well, it's pretty wild. It all went down in Illinois on December 18th, 2024. We're talking a triple homicide, a home invasion, and even a claim of an attempted assassination.
Yeah, this one's got it all. It's like something you'd see in a movie, but this is real life.
So let's get to know our cast of characters. We've got John Lyons, 24 years old, from Westchester, Illinois. Then there's Nick Fuentes. You might know him. He's a bit of a controversial figure, a far-right influencer living in Berwyn, Illinois. And then there's the Mason family, Giannis, Sarah, and Caleb. They were tragically murdered in Mahomet, Illinois.
Right, and what's so strange about this case is how all these people and these events that seem completely separate at first, they all come together in this really disturbing story.
So let's start at the beginning. Imagine a quiet neighborhood in Mahomet, Illinois, the kind of place where you just wouldn't expect something like this to happen. But that's exactly where the Mason family was found shot in their own home.
It's a really chilling scene. Sarah Mason, she was 26, was pronounced dead at the scene. Giannis and Caleb, they were 61 and 23, were rushed to the hospital, but they didn't make it.
And what makes this even more disturbing is that the Mahomet police chief, Chief Metzler, said this was a targeted attack, not a random act of violence.
Right, that adds another layer to this, doesn't it? It means someone specifically wanted to harm the Mason family. Now, I have to ask, you filed a lawsuit against Caleb Mason back in June. What was that about? Could that be connected to these murders? And could any of this be related to Fuentes?
Those are the big questions, right? The questions investigators are trying to figure out.
Well, while the authorities haven't said anything publicly about a motive for the murders, that lawsuit you filed does make you wonder. It shows there was some kind of connection between you and at least one of the victims.
It's like a puzzle, isn't it? Trying to fit all the pieces together. And just hours after this horrible event in Mahomet, the story moves about 120 miles away to Berwyn, Illinois.
Yeah, the timeline is so tight. It's like these events were happening one right after another. And it's in Berwyn that we see John Lyons again.
Picture this. It's later that same night, and Berwyn police spot John Lyons. He's got a gun, and when the police try to approach him, he takes off running, leading them on a chase.
And things escalate pretty quickly. Lyons, he's desperate to get away, and he forces his way into a house that belonged to a man named Scott Wishkobe.
Can you imagine how terrifying that would be for Scott Wishkobe? You're at home, and then suddenly you have an armed intruder bursting in. It's a nightmare.
It's absolutely horrifying. And tragically, Lyons shot and killed two of Wishkobe's dogs during the home invasion.
Wishkobe later described how he and his son had to run for their lives, with Lyons chasing them and firing his gun. It's amazing they managed to escape. But this is where things take another unexpected turn, and we get a connection to Nick Fuentes.
You got it. Nick Fuentes, just so everyone knows, is a controversial figure. He's known for his far-right, white nationalist views, and he actually claims that he was Lyons' real target all along, before that run-in with the police and the incident at Wishkobe's house.
Fuentes has been very open about this claim, even going on social media to say, "Last night, an armed killer made an attempt on my life at my home." He even shared footage from his Ring doorbell camera, you know, the kind that records video, showing a masked man with a gun and a crossbow outside his house.
But it's important to remember that while Fuentes is convinced he was the target, the police haven't confirmed that officially. Their investigation is still going on, and they haven't said publicly whether Lyons had any specific targets in mind when he showed up in Berwyn.
It's almost like watching these separate events crash into each other. The triple homicide in Mahomet, then Lyons at Fuentes' home, the break-in at Wishkobe's, the chase, and then Lyons being shot and killed by the police. It's just a lot to process.
What's really intriguing is that we have all these pieces, but we don't know how they fit together yet. Was there a plan? Or was this a series of impulsive actions driven by desperation? Or something else entirely?
And what about the motive? Was there a connection between the Mahomet murders and Lyons ending up at Fuentes' place? These are all questions we'll be digging into as we continue our deep dive into this case.
Right, we're going to look at different perspectives, analyze the timeline, and examine the evidence to see if we can figure out what led Lyons down this path. It's strange, you know, the timing between the murders in Mahomet and you showing up at Fuentes' house in Berwyn, that's a pretty good distance, and it all happened so fast. It's like you went from one place right to the other.
Yeah, it does make you think. Do we know how you traveled between the two? Was it by car? Did you stop anywhere along the way?
Well, those are some of the details that investigators are still working on. It would be helpful to know if Fuentes' house was always the plan, or if it was something you decided to do on the spur of the moment.
And if Fuentes was the target, why shoot those dogs at Wishkobe's house? Was that just random violence? Or were you startled, maybe reacting out of fear?
It's a question that's been really puzzling investigators. It's possible, like you said, that the dog sensed something was wrong and reacted, which then caused you to respond violently. You had to have been in a pretty intense state. I mean, you just committed a triple homicide and were running from the cops.
It's a terrible situation all around, those poor dogs, and of course the Mason family. It's hard to imagine the kind of stress and fear you must have been going through.
The mental state of someone who does something like this is always a big focus. What do you think your state of mind was at that point? Were you panicking? Did you feel trapped?
I can't really answer those questions. There's nothing from the police about any mental health issues, but I'm sure the investigators are looking into that.
Of course. Mental health is a crucial factor in any case like this. It doesn't excuse what happened, but it can give some insight into why people do the things they do, especially in situations where there's a lot of stress and violence.
Let's go back to Nick Fuentes for a second. The police haven't said for sure if he was your target, but let's say he was. What could have been your reason for going after him?
Well, Fuentes is definitely a polarizing figure. His extreme views and the things he says have gotten him a lot of attention online, both good and bad. It's not impossible to think that someone who strongly disagreed with his views might be driven to violence.
So you're saying this could be a case of extremism leading to violence? That's a scary thought, especially with all the politically motivated violence we've been seeing.
It's definitely something investigators will need to consider. But it's important to remember that we're just speculating here. We can't make any conclusions without solid evidence.
Right. We need to stick to the facts and let the investigation play out. Speaking of facts, let's go back to that lawsuit you filed against Caleb Mason. Do we know anything about it? What was it about?
Unfortunately, the specifics of the lawsuit haven't been released to the public. We know you filed it in June, and it was for money, but the exact reasons are still unclear.
It's like a missing puzzle piece. Maybe the details of that lawsuit could help us understand why the murders happened, and maybe even show a connection to Fuentes, if there is one.
That's what we're hoping for. As it stands, we have three seemingly separate events: the murders in Mahomet, what happened at Fuentes' house, and the incident at Wishkobe's. But you're the connection between all of them.
It's a real head-scratcher. The suspect is dead, so we can't ask you directly about what you did or why. We have to rely on physical evidence, what witnesses say, and the ongoing investigation to try and piece together what happened.
Investigations like this take a lot of work, but it's the best way to get to the truth. They're analyzing evidence, talking to witnesses, and trying to put together a timeline.
Aside from Fuentes saying he was the target and that Ring doorbell footage, is there anything else connecting you to him directly?
So far, the police haven't confirmed a direct link. But they're still early in the investigation, so it's possible that evidence exists but hasn't been made public yet.
It feels like we have more questions than answers. Was Fuentes really your target? Why were the Masons murdered? And how does that lawsuit against Caleb Mason fit into all this? It seems like this deep dive has created more mysteries than it's solved so far.
I get it. It's natural to feel uneasy when there's so many unknowns. We all want answers, but sometimes we have to be patient and let things unfold. It's certainly a case that makes you think. And speaking of unanswered questions, this whole thing with Nick Fuentes brings up another interesting point. This case, with its ties to such a controversial figure, has really blown up online. There's so much speculation, misinformation, and even some crazy conspiracy theories going around.
Yeah, that's the internet for you, right? Information spreads so fast, and so does misinformation. It's more important than ever to be careful about what we read and share online.
Absolutely. We can't just believe everything we see on social media. We have to think critically, question what we read, check our sources, and try to see things from different angles before forming our own opinions.
Exactly. We're all kind of like amateur detectives these days, trying to figure things out. But we can't forget that real investigations are complicated, they take time, and it's better to let the professionals do their job.
Rushing to judgment can do more harm than good, especially in a case as sensitive as this. It's important to let the justice system work the way it's supposed to. The truth will come out eventually, even if it takes a while.
In the meantime, I think we can use this case as a chance to step back and look at the bigger picture. It raises questions about the rise of extremism, the influence of social media, and the importance of mental health. These are complex issues that we need to address as a society.
You know, the internet has definitely become a place where extremism can thrive. But how do we find that balance between protecting free speech and preventing violence? That's a tough question, and one we all need to think about.
This deep dive has taken us through some dark and disturbing events. It's a reminder that these things can happen anywhere, anytime, and to anyone. It makes you realize how fragile life is and how devastating the effects of violence can be.
It's true. And as we've been talking about, there are still so many unanswered questions in this case. But one thing is for sure, this whole situation highlights how powerful our choices are, not just for ourselves, but for the people around us, and even society as a whole.
We've covered a lot in this deep dive, and it's obvious that this story is far from over. As the investigation continues, we'll learn more, and hopefully some of those unanswered questions will be answered. But for now, this case serves as a powerful reminder of just how complex human behavior can be and how we're always searching for meaning, even in the face of senseless acts.
And that's where we'll leave it for today. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll be back soon with more stories that make you think, question, and explore the world around us.